Hey Rocky, how are you?
Hey, Doug, good to be on the show again. I hope you and your family are well.
Yes, thank you. Same to you. We are doing all right. Nobody is sick. Thank you for coming back onto the show. I think you're going to be the first repeat guest on the video show, so congratulations for that honor.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm honored to be on the show and thanks for the invite.
We're going to talk about COVID today. Last time we talked about your book, which I see in many copies around your room there. Uh, Today we're going to talk about COVID, and basically you've come up with a plan, a 100-day plan to help companies get back in the groove, get things going again. Is that accurate? Yeah.
Yeah, I've always believed in whenever you start a new job or get new responsibilities, this concept of putting together a 100-day plan is very, very helpful. And so, as I was starting to think about the rapid rebuild of the economy, the rapid rebuild of individuals' businesses, or rapid rebuild of your own personal lives, it naturally fit that the 100-day plan would work. And so, as we begin this rebuilding of the economy, or in a particular case, the rebuilding of a business, I think it's important to lay out that 100-day plan so that then you have mile markers along the way. You have accountability checkpoints for not only yourself but your progress for your organization. And so the 100-day plan fits really well into this whole concept of rapid rebuild.
Okay. I noticed one of your talking points that you use the term new normal, which I've heard from the news outlets and from a lot of people. It scares me to think what the new normal is going to be because, particularly in my industry where I interview lots of entertainment people, performing artists, who have particularly been hit hard because they just are not allowed to do concerts anymore. And some of them, their bread and butter depends on performance. Uh, what do you think the definition of the new normal is going to look like?
Well, I think what'll happen is, and by the way, I'm a firm believer that extremes are no good on either side. So I think, my example quickly would be us all being in an office working every single day and maybe having 100,000 square feet of office space may have been the old way of doing it. Today we're completely virtual, and I'm not sure that's the right answer as well. And so I think the new normal will be something, in many cases, a hybrid where you need to have your people come into the office for various meetings. But I think never having an office is probably not going to be the right way to go as well. So the new normal for me is a variation of some of the things that we learned, and maybe now they're best practices that of we may not have done, or we may not have felt comfortable doing, but today we're thinking, you know what, this works. And so a variation you know of distance learning, a variation of people working from home. Maybe we realized, I mean, as you know, during my time at UPS, I moved 9 times. I'm not sure I had to move in retrospect all of those times, because if my responsibility was, this hemisphere, I could have probably lived anywhere to do it instead of being at the corporate office in Atlanta, that I was maybe there one day a month. So I think that those are some of the things that we're learning and getting more comfortable with, but I don't think it'll be the extreme on the side of us all being in one location the way it used to be.
Well, I think that remote is, like you said, it's good and bad. And I think that a lot of companies can adopt using it. The technology is there. I think we don't need to have people flying all over the country to participate in meetings when it can be done via Skype or Zoom. I think that part is good, not only for COVID, but for many economic reasons. It's cheaper. Environmentally, you're not having people flying on airplanes or driving, things like that. The one part about the virtual aspect that I don't particularly like, and I wanted to get your quick take on this, was the idea of the kids in school. I'm all for the online learning for university level. I think that's fabulous, particularly for people who have worked for a while and maybe they want to go back to school and get an advanced degree so they can do it at nights and on weekends. And Okay. But K through 12, to switch from the brick and mortar schools exclusively to online, I think that's a terrible idea. What do you think?
So ultimately, I think that the answer lies in what are you ultimately trying to accomplish? So, for example, when you think about children in school, there are many things you're trying to accomplish with that child above beyond apart from the educational piece. There's the interaction piece. There's the ability to socially get along with others. There's the ability to understand rules and regulations and how things work within a classroom. And so those are all life lessons that are being taught, as well as the fundamental educational piece. And so for me, I would agree that it's good for them to be in school because there's those social lessons that they're learning and there's the ability to learn from each other. And then there's also that ability for the teacher to see the student, whether they're falling a little bit too far behind or not. So I would agree with you that that's a difficult thing to do from a distance learning point of view. Now, on the other side of the spectrum is that college student who is is a junior, senior, going in for a graduate class, and they are preparing themselves to be in the workplace as well. And so if you think about it for a second, when you are in the workplace, you're on conference calls, you have to have the ability to be self-motivated, you have to be able to work alone at times as well as on a team. And so that distance learning, is also helpful from that perspective. So, it's kind of boring to be on a 3-hour conference call for school. Maybe I may be doing better if I was in a classroom, but when you start that job, you may be on a 3-hour conference call for work where you really have to maintain
Right.
your attention span. You have to make sure you learn how to participate on that call because that's the way business works. You're not in a meeting every single time. So I think that when you break those two apart, you can understand where the education is such an important part of it. In the case of a child, there's other skills you're trying to teach them, social skills, interactive skills. And as an adult, you're teaching them other skills, the ability to be able to handle yourself on a conference call, maintain your attention span, be able to interact on a conference call. And so naturally, that distance learning would help a college student in that setting, but it may not be as helpful for a child in school.
Well, the big point that I have with the K through 12s is that if they're going to stay home, it's going to require one of the parents to stay home. And most of the parents that I know, they both work. So that time that their kids are away is their time to go work or just to get the kids out of the house for a little while so they have a little peace and quiet.
It's interesting, Doug. Though you highlight a very interesting a very interesting thing that happens with this whole concept of unintended consequences, right? So when you think about it for a second, when the whole pandemic hit, people just naturally went to, well, we'll just do distance learning. It's not that big a deal, right? It makes sense. We could do it. And then the unintended consequences were what you just spoke about, right? They're serious consequences. So I'm not trying to make them consequences that aren't large in magnitude or impactful inside a family. But think about the unintended consequences of some of these decisions. Oh, to your point, two parents working, right? You may now have to, get daycare that you didn't have to have before. It may impact, you may have to change a shift in your job. So there's that piece of it. There's the unintended consequence of you start to realize that not everybody has the internet speed or capabilities inside their home. You may find out that some families only have one computer, but they have three children that each need the computer at the same time. So I think that, there's a quiet lesson in all of this that, hey, when you make these decisions, there's unintended consequences that can be very, very impactful and very disruptive to what you're trying to accomplish. And I think sometimes we make decisions, and sometimes decisions like this were made with good intentions, but not really thought through. And I think one of the things that's coming out of this whole COVID is this whole concept of, hey, maybe I really don't have a good continuity plan. Maybe my continuity plan for my business or how I teach or how I conduct business isn't as buttoned up as I thought because I never really had it for a pandemic. And so there's some very, really valuable lessons. And as we talked about the new normal, there's going to be some things that really good came out of it that you learned from. And then I think there's things that you were just, highlighting that, hey, you know what, there's these other issues that take place. And am I putting a child at a disadvantage if they, at least in that classroom at that moment, they all have the same resources? That's not always true, to your point, when someone is learning from home and they may not have that same opportunity based on what's going on in the family, whether they have the computers, whether they have the internet speed, all those kinds of things. So we should try to make everything as level as we can. I would think to start off.
Well, one of the points you brought up that was a good point was that COVID sort of hit everybody over the head with a baseball bat. Nobody, nobody saw this coming, and nobody knew what was to be after it came in such a magnitude that it did. As we start to get back to this quote unquote new normal, and it's actually the first talking point on your sheet, so I thought I'd bring this up as well. Safety is a core value. We do have the vaccine, although its effectiveness has yet to be seen. It just hasn't been out long enough for us to really make a good, accurate assumption on that. That once you get vaccinated, that's it, you're done. You're not a spreader, you won't catch it. Okay, we don't really know the answers to those questions yet. But what are you proposing with your plan here in terms of safety? Because the only stuff I've seen as of late is masks and plastic partitions between people, like at the bank and in the casinos here in Las Vegas. They've got petitions up between the dealers and the card players, and it's horrible. I don't like it one bit. So what are you proposing?
So when I look at these big these 8 elements that I think are so important to the health and well-being of your businesses, whether it's in non-COVID time or COVID time, safety is a core value. I think the difference now is, when we talk about safety as a core value in non-pandemic times, we're talking about the traditional safety, lifting and lowering, injuries, accidents, vehicle safety. But I think as we move through here, there's individual safety that's important as well. Do your customers feel safe in your place of business? Do your employees feel good about you care so much about safety that you won't let them work in an unsafe place? And so for me, safety as a core value becomes even deeper and more important because it's not only the traditional safety elements, the OSHA and those kinds of things. Safety comes down to, do I feel like I work in a place of business that care so much about me? And so it could be the protocols that you have, going forward, and the ways you make your customers feel safe. Because remember, if you think about it, most businesses never really took in mind, well, my employees need to be safe, but how about my customers, right? So I'm a restaurant owner, or take the casino you just referenced, right? So my employees need to be safe, but do my customers feel safe? Because if my customers don't feel safe in here, then at that point, I'm not going to have customers then. So my employees may feel good, but my customers don't. And so I think it's important to understand what are the protocols and what are the things that make your customers feel safe. And I think once you start to do those kinds of things, or understand at least those kind of things, you start to then attract your business back because your customers feel safe there. And so although it may be uncomfortable inside a casino the way you described it, if it's allowing the public to feel safe, then you're going to be able to bring back your revenue, bring back your customer base again. So I think that it really comes down to understanding that and not assuming that what makes your customers feel safe or your employees feel safe. It's really kind of understanding it, asking them, and working through those kinds of things.
Rocky, we do have to wrap this up. We've just kind of gone right through our time. Do you have a website to give out, or a particular site for this, or just your general website, whatever you want to give
Yeah,
out?
actually, I spend time in my book, Tighten the Lug Nuts, and so the easiest, quickest way to get there would be on my site, tightenthelugnuts.com. There's actually a chapter dedicated to the 100-day plan, which I think is excellent. I actually put an example or template of a 100-day plan because this plan is not only important and will be helpful during this rapid rebuild, but also if you're changing a job, you're getting a new responsibility. And every new job I took on, I laid out my 100-day plan. So there's a template in there. And then in the book, I also talk about the big eight, I call it, these 8 key elements. We talked about safety today. There's one on, your revenue stream and trying to make sure that you have an understanding of your revenue. And so there's eight key elements. People is one of them. So I think that in the book, I talk a lot about, and I define them and give good examples, I think, that can be helpful and that you can use as a template. So the book is probably the best place. TightenTheLugnuts.com is probably the easiest and best way to find that. And then, as I said, the 100-day plan, I actually laid out when I became CEO of Unitech. I put in there the example of the 100-day plan I built and then presented to our chairman of the board and the board at the time. Here's my first 100 days as CEO of Unitech.
Okay. Do you have one of your books you can hold up close to the camera?
Let me see here. Yeah, I should be able to, because as you know, they're all over here. But here is the book, Tighten the Lug Nuts. And I also, Doug, one of the things I've been doing lately that's been a ton of fun is companies are starting to understand now what are some of the training protocols I can use or follow. And one of them is this kind of idea of a book club. And so they've been buying books, and then I dial in as the author, and we talk about a specific either chapter in the book or a specific topic. So, for example, if someone wanted to talk about the 100-day plan or talk about one of the big 8 elements, the book's in there, and then I would dial in. So they average about 20, 25 people. It's been a lot of fun, and people enjoy talking to the author. And so I absolutely enjoy. And then I don't charge anything. To me, I just appreciative that you bought the book and there's a way I can help out. So my time is gratis. I just dial in and we talk for about an hour, and it's been really a lot of fun for me, and I believe well received from their side. So because I've had companies now call me 2 or 3 different times on 2 or 3 different chapters. So it's been really rewarding and a lot of fun for me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show and sharing with us, and best of luck with everything you're doing.
You too, Doug. Be safe. And hey, next time I'm in Vegas, I'll look you up and maybe we can talk through a partition.
Take care, Rocky.
Take care.
Can't do it just halfway. All the way on love. It's a